Hey mathematicians, Caitlin Henderson here with another lesson video. This time we are talking about Unit 7, Lesson 4, specifically the midpoint. We have talked about the midpoint before. We've briefly discussed the midpoint formula, but let's do a formal introduction, description, and examples for the midpoint. So first and foremost, let's talk about midpoint just in terms of a number line. So remember, a coordinate plane is just a series of number lines. And in this case, we're working here on this horizontal number line, which is the x-axis, and we have 2 points. And we want to find the midpoint between them, okay? Basically means if we were to take this as a piece of paper and fold it directly in half, where would we be, where would our fold be lying? Now, sometimes we can eyeball this, right? Sometimes we can be like, oh, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So that means that we're going to count in 2 to find the midpoint. Sometimes it's really straightforward like that, right? We figure out what the total is, and then we can split it in half. However, sometimes if we're not given pictures or the ability to draw, we may need to take a little note of what do we need to do to identify what that midpoint is. And what we can do is take the average of the 2 points. That means take one of our points, 0.5, add it to the other point, 0.1, and then divide it by how many values we have. And in this case, we just have 2 points that we're working with. We're just dividing it by 2. So we can take 5 and 1, add them together and get 6, divide 6 by 2, and we get 3, which, just like we found before, our midpoint here is 0.3. Okay, so that's looking at a number line, how we can identify it. Now, what if we're not working with a perfect horizontal or vertical line? We have what is called the midpoint formula. What the midpoint formula does is takes any 2 points and finds the middle on basically 2 points that form a line segment. It finds the middle. So we can fold that line segment in half and have 2 perfect congruent halves for our line segment. Now, what this fancy stuff is saying here is if we have a single point, we'll call it A. And if we have another point, let's call it B. We can take the values just like how we labeled the distance formula. We can take those values, plug them in to find our M, or our midpoint. Okay, so here for A and B, I have my point A located at x is 1 and y is 1, 1, 1. And then I have my B located at x is 3 and y is 2. Okay, so these are my points. This is my point A and my point B. And I can label these to make it a little bit easier to identify which one is my X1 and which one is my Y1. That can get super, super confusing. So it's always a good idea to write down all of your information. And then B, we're talking X2, Y2. And the point is located at 3, 2. Okay. So these are our x values and our y values for each one of our points. Then what we can do is plug it into our midpoint, which is realistically just identifying what that coordinate is. So we are taking our x1 value and adding it to our x2 value and then dividing that answer by 2 to get our new x value for our midpoint. And then we're taking our y value, adding y values 1 and 2, dividing it by 2, and that gets us our new coordinate for the m value for y, okay? So if I were to replace these, my x1 is 1, and we're adding it to x2, which is 3, dividing everything by 2. Then we have 1 and 2, 1 plus 2, and dividing that all by 2, okay? Now, if I rewrite this, and sorry, we're running out a little bit of space here, let's shift it all on over. I'm hiding it by myself for just a little bit. Okay, so 3 plus 1 is 4 divided by 2, And then we have 2 plus 1 is 3 divided by 2. Sometimes our answers may ask us to leave them as fractions, or it might ask us to solve. So 4, remember fraction line means divide. So 4 divided by 2 is what this is saying. And so that is 2. And then this is saying 3 divided by 2, which is 1.5. Oop, that point is just a smidge over. Let's do that. There we go, 1.5. So that means my midpoint is located at 2, 1.5. So if I come here, my x value is 2 and my y value is 1.5. So my midpoint is going to be located right there. Okay, so identify your coordinates, identify your x1, your x2, your y1, your y2, and then plug it into our midpoint formula. Now, some students may be able to eyeball if we have a picture here, but what happens if we don't have a picture? What if we're given 2 points and we're just asked to find the midpoint? We do the exact same thing. In this case, we'll say that L is kind of like my A value, my first point. So this is going to be my X1 and my Y1. Oops, that's a 1, and this is the comma. Okay, and then we'll say that M is kind of my B, and so this is going to be my X2 and my Y2. And then I can use my midpoint formula. So to find my coordinate, I'm going to take X1 plus X2 over 2 and Y1 plus Y2 over 2. That is going to, with substitution, remember we're still using substitution in this case, we have -2 plus 3 divided by 2. And then we have here our y1 value is 5, and then our y2 is 2, and divided by 2. We're going to add our values together. -2 plus 3. It's okay if you want to plug this in your calculator if you're not comfortable with negatives. But if I owe somebody $2 and I give them $3, that means I gave them $1 too many. Okay, and then 5 plus 2 is 7 divided by 2. So now I can simplify it. I can leave it in this form, or I can put it in decimal form, whichever one your instructions say. So this is a 0.5 over 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. Okay, so that means our midpoint is located where x is a half and y is 3.5. This is how we'd solve it if we did not have a graph. Now, your text is going to go through and have you analyze other people's work and solve for this. Make sure you understand this formula inside and out because it is kind of one of the main topics. It's a very short unit. However, that's it for this lesson. So like always, if you have questions, please reach out. And until next time, bye guys.